and joining me now to discuss this, I'm joined by John Laughland.
Laughland,
with a kind of a, Laughland. John Laughland, who is the Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy. On y va. Pile. 7. Voilà. Là. Vas-y, c'est bon. Well, joining me now to discuss all of this is John Laughland, who's the Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation here in Paris. John Laughland, before we talk about things in greater detail, what is the significance of this today for Britain and for Europe, in your view?
well, obviously it's a big event in British politics because, as we know, the European issue has been at the heart of British politics, really, for 25 or 30 years. I would say ever since, or probably even really for 40 years, ever since Britain joined in 1972, there's been back and forth in Britain about it. The two main parties have been divided over it. And of course, within the Conservative Party, as everyone knows, there's been a major civil war over Europe ever since Mrs. Thatcher's Bruges speech in 1988. And now, again, it will, of course, continue to dominate British politics for the years to come, affecting, obviously, its foreign policy, but also its domestic policy, the whole issue of the relationship between London and the regions and so on. But I think it's important to say that this is also a very major day and indeed a major blow for the European Union itself. We have a tendency, I think, to look at these coming negotiations from the point of view of Britain alone. What will Britain get? What will it try to get? And so on. But there can be no hiding the fact that by losing a member state, and indeed one of the most important member states, the European Union has suffered a major blow. It will suffer financially because Britain's contributions are extremely high. It's the second largest contributor out of the 28 member states. It will suffer in military terms because, of course, the British armed forces are the most powerful in Europe. It will lose the largest capital city in the European Union, and it will lose its financial centre. And of course, above all, the European Union has lost one of its key raison d'être, which is to be a ever closer union between the peoples of Europe. That first phrase of the preamble of the Treaty of Rome has, if you like, now been blown out of the water to the extent that a major member state has now decided not to continue with the goal of ever closer union, but on the contrary, to leave the organisation entirely.
Right. Well, we'll perhaps look at some of those issues a little later on, particularly what other European Union countries might have to gain, even if at first sight it is a bad thing, Britain leaving the European Union, particularly in terms of financial markets within the European Union, and how Britain might use its military clout as some kind of a sweetener, perhaps, in negotiations later on. First of all, let's take a look at the actual timetable now. What happens next?
Well, as soon as the article is triggered, as you know, that's the starting point for negotiations, and those negotiations will concern the bill that Brussels hopes to extract from London to meet existing commitments on the one hand, and on the other hand, Britain, as we know from Theresa May's speech at Lancaster House, she's outlined a whole series of goals that she hopes to achieve, and they are very ambitious. She wants a full free trade agreement with the European Union, rather along the lines of the one that Canada is about to sign or is about to be ratified.
Not without hiccups.
Not without hiccups. And of course, the similar agreement with the United States seems to have run into the sands. So these goals are very ambitious, and we'll have to see how things go. Both sides in this come to the negotiations, I think, with strengths and with weaknesses. Britain's strength is that it is a powerful economy. Unlike most of the continental economies, it has strong growth. It hasn't suffered from high unemployment or anemic growth or lack of growth, as most of them have. But it also has weaknesses. As we all know, the internal relationships within the nations, the composite nations of the United Kingdom, are now being put in question. But the European Union too has strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, it's a huge bloc, 27 member states, hundreds of millions of people, very powerful and so on. But it's also riven by internal divisions. It's not only lost this very important member state, but there are north-south tensions, mainly between Germany and the Club Med states, particularly Greece. But there are also east-west tensions within the European Union. So it's not as if the European Union itself is negotiating from a position of strength in this. It has a number of internal problems, very serious ones, which will make its own negotiating hand weaker.
Nevertheless, so far, and of course, Britain will try, no doubt, to divide and rule as things get tougher. But so far, the European Union has remained impressively united. There was a lot of talk before this referendum in Britain that because Germany was the biggest economy, the most powerful country within the European Union, because the German car market relied so heavily on Britain, then everything else would simply fall into place. And in fact, it's become obvious that even within the car industry in Germany, let alone the rest of Germany, let alone the rest of the European Union, it seems that the political importance of maintaining the European Union, not allowing it to fall apart, supersedes everything else.
I think that's right. On the other hand, I think that the Brexit arguments, which said that the car industry, the German car industry, was used as an example, really, rather than a particular case study. The claim wasn't it, that since Britain has a negative trade balance with the European Union, in other words, it exports far more from the European Union than it exports to it. Paradoxically, that strengthens its hands in the negotiations because European producers do not have an interest in tariffs being put up between Britain and the continent. So whether or not a particular German car manufacturer says this or that is in a sense irrelevant, because the overall picture is one of a negative trade balance or a positive trade balance from the point of view of the European Union. I think that we'll have to see how these things pan out. But you're absolutely right to say that the European leaders are afraid of one thing, and that is of there being a contagion. Frankly, I don't think there will be a contagion. I think they will succeed in keeping the European Union together. Why? Because Britain is different from the European Union countries, the other European Union countries, in one very important respect, which Nigel Farage's language about a people's army and a rebellion against the elites has obscured from view. And it's that Britain is unique in the European Union in having a political class which is profoundly divided and always has been on the European question. Both Labour and Conservative have had internal divisions on the European Union, most spectacularly, of course, the Conservatives, but in the 1970s, the same was true of the Labour Party. And that means that the British political elite has been divided on Europe in a way which is true of no other political elite anywhere on the European continent, not even in those countries which have gone through a severe crisis like Greece. Even in Greece, the basic goal of staying in the European Union and indeed even of keeping the euro unites the political class.
Yes, but if Britain were to secure itself a very agreeable deal, then it may be that a number of other European political parties, and the obvious one is Marine Le Pen in France, would espouse leaving the European Union, and with great success.
We've already seen how the Brexit vote has affected politics in other countries, in particular in France. The Front National never supported France leaving the European Union before the 23rd of June 2016. It was only after Brexit. No, they supported leaving the euro. They talked about leaving the euro.
Yes, but they were very close to saying it beforehand. They were very
well.
Europhobic.
But they've now moved. They have moved. They have now said they want a referendum. Marine Le Pen has said she wants a referendum, rather like Cameron did on a renegotiated treaty. Of course, she's coming to it from a different perspective, but it's had an effect already. However, the big difference, I repeat, is that the Front National is not part of the French elite. It's a big party, yes, it has a lot of support, but no one can say that it's part of the French political establishment. It is, on the contrary, an anti-system party.
In any case, this timetable ahead is subject to the results of the French elections, the German elections. Then any deal has to be ratified by the UK Parliament, by the European Union Parliament, and by every member country. Theresa May has said no deal is better than a bad deal. She will walk away and just use World Trade Organization rules if she doesn't get a good deal. What is a bad deal?
Well, this question was put on the floor of the House of Commons to Theresa May when she came back from the last European Council in Brussels, and she didn't answer it. So it's a bit difficult for me to answer it in her place. I assume what she means, or what they must mean when they say that, is that if, for example, the bill for leaving, the demand for compensation for undertakings which Britain made while a member, if that bill was too high, I imagine she must be referring to something as that.
The exit bill?
Yes, the exit bill.
Which some people say should be decided even before trade.
That is indeed the
agreement
EU's
is
position, that should be the
So
beginning.
she might just walk off before anything is discussed if that bill is too high.
Theoretically, yes. I think that is what they mean when they say that a bad deal is worse than that no deal is worse than a bad deal. What they mean is that they can walk away from negotiations on a free trade area because existing World Trade Organization rules will allow Britain to continue to trade with the European Union. And there is some truth in this argument. After all, we don't have Britain, or the United Kingdom does not have a trade agreement with the United States of America or with Australia or with India or with a number of other countries, because, of course, as members of the European Union, our commercial policy is agreed together with the other EU member states. But everyone knows that Britain already trades with those countries, and indeed probably with every country in the world. So there is some truth in the statement that the United Kingdom, like any country, can fall back on existing World Trade Organization agreements.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave it there. I don't think we have time for Northern Ireland, Scotland. Thank you very much, anyway, John Laughland, of the Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation here in Paris.